Welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, it's a fun one. I don't always do these, direct to VOD movies, these kind of ridiculous, horror adjacent comedy, ridiculous type movies, but with a concept as ridiculous as the Invisible Raptor. What if there was a raptor on the loose in a small town and that raptor happened to be invisible? I just couldn't pass this one up. So we are talking about the Invisible Raptor today from director Mike Hermosa. And joining me, we have Robbie Sherman joining me on the podcast. We were going to be doing another movie next month. I think next month. I don't know when that movie comes out, but whenever it comes out, Robbie's going to be on the show. But then I was looking for a guest for this one, and he was like, hey, I want to watch that ridiculous, insane movie called The Invisible Raptor. So we got Robbie on a little early. So we got a fun conversation coming up about The Invisible Raptor. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Of course, it's currently the end of the year, lots of Oscar movies to cover. So, of course, I had to squeeze out The Invisible Raptor first, but lots of podcast episodes coming your way. So make sure you're subscribed so you'll get them all as they come out. You could also follow us on all the social medias at Piecing Pod, find out what we're doing, what's going on, whenever I need guests, all that kind of stuff. So check me out on all of those. And don't forget, on Facebook, you could join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. So with that said, let's talk about The Invisible Raptor. All right, Robbie Sherman is with us. We're going to talk about The Invisible Raptor. How's it going, Robbie?
Fantastic. Happy to be on Piecing It Together pod. This is a weird movie we're gonna have fun talking about for an hour or so.
Yeah, it is absolutely ridiculous. I don't. First of all, I mean, we'll get into the movie more later. I want to get to introducing you, but I mean, this movie did not need to be 2 hours, and that is gonna. I don't know how we talk about it for an hour, but that's a topic we'll get into at some point. But just speaking of time lengths, but before we do get to The Invisible Raptor, it is your first time on the show. Tell my listeners a little about you and what you do and your podcast and everything.
Yeah, Conversations with Robbie Sherman, the internet's 578th most popular podcast out there.
Sure.
That's not a specific. I'm just assuming there's a lot of podcasts. I'm happy to be one of them. There's a lot of cool people in the podcasting sphere. Good people. I like hanging out with you, David. We did an awesome podcast on the Daffy Duck's Quack Busters. I mean, that's one of the best podcasts I've ever put out. Thanks for being on there.
Right on.
You got plans to do the day the Earth blew up here in a couple of months.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm also a musician. I'm going to be putting out some music soon. I did an EP with Jesus on the Moon, and we're going to be doing another couple of EPs and an album to kind of tie that all together. I got some music video work going on with that. I'm excited to be here to talk about the movie. This was a fun movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all kinds of fun, creative stuff coming from you, and we've got that Looney Tunes movie coming up that you'll be on the show for. But then this one kind of just popped up out of nowhere, and we're like, hey, why not have you on earlier and get you on for this one? And this is a very wacky, ridiculous movie. I had a lot of fun with it, but when you get a movie, called The Invisible Raptor or any of these kinds of like ridiculous, creature type movies, going in like this might be really unwatchably bad, or it might be really fun, or just it could be anything, honestly. Had you heard about this before I'd kind of thrown the feelers out there for a guest on this one?
No.
It's just kind of, you're like, what is Dave talking about? What is this movie?
Yeah, I mean, that was the main reason I got a hold of you, because you posted it up on, I think, Blue Sky, and I was just like, what, The Invisible Raptor, what is this thing? And, this movie was kind of what I expected, but it was also far better made than what I anticipated. It's an odd tonal juxtaposition.
Sure.
Sometimes I feel like when B movies swing too high, like that's an equal miss as swinging too low. And this movie does both of those in spades at times.
You're so right. You're totally right. And that's the thing. Like I was excited for this movie just because of the premise. It's just so ridiculous. What if a raptor was on the loose and it was invisible. Like that is just so crazy. But at the same time, I was completely prepared to just watch it and just forget about it if it was terrible. And thankfully, it's actually pretty fun. Like you said, the tone is all over the place, but there is a lot of fun to be had in it. And so I thought it would still be worth getting into some puzzle pieces here. But with that said, let's start getting into them, and we'll talk about what works and doesn't work along the way. But what do you have for your first puzzle piece for the Invisible Raptor?
Okay, Jurassic Park is one of the biggest like puzzle pieces for
Sure.
this film. As inspiration, as fodder for jokes, Jurassic Park is a huge puzzle piece that you have to know. But at the same time, they they do jokes that are like obvious jokes with Jurassic Park a lot of the time too. And I think I don't know. I sometimes I don't think I think this film could have leaned a little harder into the headier aspects of Jurassic Park
Mm.
instead of kind of just using it as like an obvious name call out a lot of the time. Like I that that that's but it doesn't. Okay, here's where we're getting to conflicts of tone with this movie. This thing wants to be like a very silly, like broad comedy, but it has these extreme moments of sincerity in it that are so culled from the Spielberg playbook, and
Yeah.
it makes up a big DNA of this like film, and that's that's a bad way to do that because your humor is always conflicting with the sympathy you're trying to create for your characters. So
Mm.
you're giving them these like very broad jokes about fecal matter a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and man, it's just hard like to take this film seriously, and it wants you to take it seriously and love these characters. That's where it really like frustrates me because with like the original Jurassic Park, on a certain level, you can love those characters very easily because Spielberg is a film director who knows what makes people likable on a certain level and what gives
Absolutely.
them persona. And these characters are hollowed out stereotypes of such things, and the jokes they're being told to play into are just way too broad in a way that makes one of our main leads almost extremely unlikable to a degree that you don't want to sympathize with him and you don't want to hang out with
Yeah, no, he
this
is a complete and total doofus, and yeah, it is a complete mix of different tones here, and because it gets into being like a Spielberg movie at times, and then it's just being a parody of Spielberg movies at times, and it's not just Jurassic Park. I think this movie, like it goes for everything Spielberg really, but especially Jurassic Park, of course. I mean, that's where we get raptors from. It's the park. It's instead of it being an island, it's just like an actual park and the mainland. Playing God and cloning, all that kind of stuff. It's getting into all the same themes as Jurassic Park, but then also being a slapsticky spoof at the same time, which is just it's a lot. It's a lot to try to combine here.
I really feel like they shouldn't have focused around Jurassic Park as a means of setting tone. I think they should have focused around gremlins and found something to do with like
Mm.
little monster creatures because the tone of gremlins has always been pretty good. I mean, there's definitely that very racist caricature of
Sure.
the
Yeah.
Chinese man. We should probably. I think the new Gremlins cartoon found a way to deal with the Asian backdrop without being offensive. If,
Mm.
I haven't watched it, but I haven't heard anyone complain, so that's a good sign in my book.
Sure. Yeah.
Because Gremlins is so anarchic, but it's also like it has a purpose for being anarchic. Like it's about taking down the like small, like white suburbia idea of peace and like security during the holidays.
Yeah.
And it's really effective in that, and there's a reason why that film continues to be loved by me and many others. It's been the better part of 40 years since that thing came out. Like, it still got a reputation.
Yeah.
Gremlins 2 would have also been a better calling mark for the Invisible Raptor because Gremlins 2 is such a pitch perfect, like, takedown of corporate shenanigans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the type of film, the I I hate saying the name over and over again, but the Invisible Raptor, for the type of film what it is, you know, they could have done so much with like corporate stuff, like the people funding this Invisible Raptor shit. Like you could have done some real like good corporate humor instead of the more shallow leanings we got from the assistant that lived after Sean Astin got killed. Speaking
Sure,
of
sure.
which, how the hell do they get these actors to come in and do this film? Like,
That is like a rite of passage for these kinds of movies. Like they always have to have that one famous person in them, and then they get killed immediately, or they're just in like a couple scenes. But I also think most of the funniest stuff was at the facility where where they did the cloning and all that stuff, and where the Invisible Raptor like escaped and stuff like that. And so, like, yeah, to get into more of like what's going on in the background and the corporate stuff, I think would work. I think maybe you cracked the code for the Invisible Raptor 2 as we move on from Jurassic Park to Gremlins as the blueprint.
I hope so. I hope if they I guess gift us with such a thing. I hope
Yeah.
they do like try to take a smarter approach. You could say this is like a cynical takedown of the Spielberg canon
Hmm.
because like all the men in this, except for like I guess Sean Ashton's character, like they're pretty awful and
Yeah.
terrible, and you don't really want to hang out with them or do anything with them all around. And I get, I've sometimes been the guy people don't want to hang out with, whatever. Like I feel like that vibe, but I'm also like for more interesting aesthetics as you're going forward with your film. Like this has good cinematography at times, and it looks like a competent film, and that's part of what like makes it hard for me to think of it as like a grittier B movie type
Yeah.
thing.
Sure. Sure. I think also, just before we move on, just to mention, there's a lot of names directly out of Jurassic Park as well. I mean, the main character's name is Dr. Grant Walker, that is.
Oh, okay.
Stuff like that. There's all kinds of little callbacks and things like that. I mean, this movie clearly just wants to just wear it on its sleeve. I do want to ask a quick impromptu question that I just thought of before we move on to my first puzzle piece. Which Jurassic Park sequels is the Invisible Raptor better than? I would say it's better than Jurassic World Dominion, and maybe Jurassic Park 3.
Well, almost any Jurassic World film, I just say
Yeah,
you can just take them and throw them around. As far as I'm concerned, throw them
they're
off
so
a
bad.
cliff. As far as I'm concerned,
They're
like
so bad.
get rid of them. High heels notwithstanding, God bless her. That's hard to work in.
So yeah, so I'll go on to I feel like the obvious two, so we might as well get them out of the way first. I mean, you got Jurassic Park in there, and I think the other obvious one is you could go Invisible Man, but I'm going to go actually to Hollow Man, the 2000 Verhoeven film with Kevin Bacon.
Oh, okay. Is that the shot? Okay, I didn't know if that was. I was thinking that was maybe a call out to arachnophobia.
It could be. It could be. But you know what? And I know what you're talking about with that shot, but also I was just thinking just the kind of sleaziness of it. Taking a classic B
Yeah.
movie trope type thing and making it sleazier and like wearing it on its sleeve just how B movie and horny and like just weird and dirty the movie is. And the Invisible Raptor, it's very
I'm
horny.
sorry, this movie is the worst kind of horny. Like we are letting people get away with tons of stuff that should not be happening. Like, oh shit.
We're in a weird
Uh,
time. We're in a weird time
you
for
you
our
cannot
culture.
make one of your leads a voyeur anymore. Okay, I get, guys. I've been covering Lupin the Third. I know like the problems with that series, but that series started in 1968. Okay, this thing was made last year, within the last 2 years. Okay,
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
they know the fucking arguments. They don't.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be doing this as a cheap joke anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, goes back to the era that it's spoofing, I guess, right? Could they use that as a shield here?
Maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
the problems with Spielberg are becoming more wholesale as we get older, and
Hmm.
I haven't seen that autobiographical pick, whatever the hell that's called. But I think that has some motherly issues going on with it, from what I've been
Sure.
hearing from people. I've been hesitant to look that up.
Yeah, it was all right, but uh, but yeah, let's go on to another puzzle piece. What do you got next?
Okay, I'm thinking maybe like 80s slashers come into this a little bit, but
Yeah.
I don't like there's no specificity to that. Like the kills feel a little more intense than something like that.
Mm,
I That's another thing about the varying tone of this. Like I never really know like what it's taking from at any time, and it feels like a jumbled mess.
yeah.
This Do you think maybe this feels a little bit like Critters? Like, are
Hmm.
you familiar with Critters? Like, you
I haven't
familiar with that?
I haven't seen it since I probably rented it in high school. It's one of those movies that we all kind of rented back in that era, and I'm sure I saw it back then, but I haven't seen it since then. I think Critters would be a good example of this. I was also going to say, like, just to kind of combine with your piece there, I was also thinking Scream as far as a movie that is just
Okay,
it's so self-referential without like being a straight up spoof.
I don't think this balances, its characters in the same way. But yeah, I actually was thinking about Scream earlier and wondering if maybe that might be an antecedent to this, if this like steals a certain type of tone from that, because
Hmm.
Scream is straightforward, but it's also metatextual.
Exactly.
It's from one of the great horror masters of all time, and it's all about being a horror film creator and what's expected of you in the marketplace at any given time it's being made. So
Yeah.
maybe that's also part of this, but I don't know. This film doesn't feel sharp enough to kind of pierce those like real metatextual, elements that it kind of shows us. I mean, this is a film where they have at least I don't know, about 7 minutes of just full on like shit jokes of just people doing terrible stuff with like fresh shit. Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
oh my god, that was a low point for me, David. I watched this movie a couple of times, and every time I was just like, ugh, like what are you doing? And like, uh, I I don't know why this film has to range so low. Like I wish it was a little sleazier in the way like an '80s horror movie was, because just like all these shit jokes, it felt real like childish. Like like come on guys, we're grown men. That one guy is supposed to be 41. Like, why would he be doing that? Like,
Yeah.
you know what? You know what? If a dinosaur fucking ate my dog and shat him out on the lawn, I wouldn't go up to it and start kicking the dog in. Like, what?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like, that was sad. Like, I feel bad for that guy. Like, somebody wrote that and he was just like, "Yep, this is okay for me to do on film. To release out in public." I'd
But
be
but
like,
but
"No,
on
man.
but on the other side of the coin, did you ever think you'd be on a podcast talking about a movie where an invisible raptor eats a dog and then shits it out, and then the guy has to go and look through the shit? So I mean,
Maybe
at least this is original, right?
maybe that is the greatest trick Lucifer ever pulled on the world in convincing us that he is, beautiful and interesting to think about, when in
Yeah.
fact he's just a big old pile of shit on a rug. Like,
There you go. That's it. I think that's it. We cracked it here. I will jump to. I don't usually do this, but I'm going to go to a piece that I've actually never seen before, but I love in concept, and so I just wanted to bring it up because I think it fits really
okay,
well. It is bad CGI gator and also bad CGI shark. Have you seen these movies?
I'm going to give you a resounding no on that.
Okay. So these are these, straight to VOD, schlocky,
Yeah,
sci-fi horror type movies that hang a lantern on the idea that the CGI gator is really, really bad looking. It's done very poorly for cheap. They obviously had no budget. And so they're just like, hey, why don't we just say screw it and make it look bad on purpose? And
yeah,
I think that is a great precedent for saying, you know what, we don't have budget, let's just not even have a raptor. Let's just go straight up invisible, skip the middleman, and it's just baked right into the script that this is how it's going to look. And I think that those movies kind of, set the tone for something like this that just. It's almost anti-movie in a way, and I should be offended by that, but at the same time, I find it a little bit refreshing in a weird way.
You know, I like stuff like that in concept, but the older I get, the more I'm just like, no, I want some real like top. Like I either want
Yes.
like the bottom of the bottom or I want the top of the top. Like
Yeah.
just giving me in the middle here is never satisfying, and I I definitely feel like they worked that to their advantage as best they could with this script, with this nearly 2 hour script that didn't need. They needed an editor more than they needed nice looking houses.
Yeah. This movie
Like
at an hour and 20, I would have recommended it to everybody. I'd be like, this movie's ridiculous. Have some beers, just have a good time with it, but 2 hours is ridiculous.
I mean, that extra half hour, you and the boys are just spent and you're just tired. You don't want to have a beer anymore. You know, you just want it to kind of end. You're all messing with your phones. And then, once it gets done, you're just like, yeah, that was fine. And then, like, you all leave. Like, like
Yeah.
2 hours for this is a party ender. I'm sorry.
Too much. Way too much Invisible Raptors. But
Can I ask you something? How do you feel about like the more sincere Spielberg stuff, like the ET reference with the child going into the back door with the light on? Because like
yeah.
I did that did not register as humor to me. That just felt like straight up ripping off, in service of trying to do humor, but it just felt like too reverential, and it didn't create a spark for me at all.
I didn't mind it. Like, I'm not going to say that it's like high humor here. Like, it's just, I got the reference, and the fact that it's an invisible raptor doing it, like, is pretty funny inherently. And so, like, I did get a little bit of a kick out of it. I wouldn't say it didn't not make me laugh at all, but at the same time, it's not the funniest thing in the world.
Cut it. You edit that shit right out. That's what
Yeah.
you do with that, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's where that extra half hour didn't need to be. But yeah. So, what do you have for your next piece?
Okay. I've been kind of wondering. Have you ever seen Tucker and Dale versus Evil?
Yes, I have, and I got to admit, I didn't really like it when I watched it, and I think it's partially because everybody hyped it up as like the funniest thing since Evil Dead 2. And then I watched it and I'm like,
Uh,
it's pretty funny, but I didn't love it.
no, no. There are very few films that are as funny and scary as Evil Dead 2.
It's the best.
It's so good.
Yeah. So are you a fan of Tucker and
I'm
Dale?
not like a big fan of it, but it did come to mind while I was watching this because I was kind of thinking like Tucker and Dale did this type of thing better. Like it wasn't so straightforward with his genre references that they just become flat references. Like it gave you a good enough setting and like character actions that were still like kind of dirty and like gritty in the way the things it's trying to evoke are. Also, I think it was sharper in its satire. Like this is really blunt with how it views like I guess what are supposed to be small town people, but there's a giant raptor museum. I don't understand the tone of this movie. Like they have that old lady who's a crazy chicken lady, and she like outdoes Colonel Sanders with her eggs or some shit. That was
Uh
very weirdly sketched out, and they probably could have cut like half the jokes they did with her. Like there were some funny lines, but she is operating at the same frequency that the doctor from Lower Decks is, where she's like constantly cursing, and that's like part of the joke. I've seen her in a bunch of stuff. I can't remember her name for the life of me. Very famous actress that did that. Kind of known for mean old ladies here and there, so it's not too surprising. The
mm.
person I was most surprised by was Richard Riehle as the sheriff.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. What do I know him from? Just a million things, but he's
Oh
just one
man,
of those character actors.
I mean, he has like credits on stage as a
Y-
like Shakespearean actor of some kind. I was reading earlier, so he's had an incredible career, and he is so game for every line he goes into. Like he's doing his classic like angry persona, but the guy, his like deputy, is so weird and like off-putting, like for what he is, because he looks like he's about a 45 towards 50 or so, right?
Mm.
But he's really into EDM, and he like
Yeah.
when we meet him, he is talking about buttholes and how like the rings around your butthole commentate how old you are,
Yeah.
which I do not believe is true at all, and I
I mean,
refuse to think
it,
about it.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing about science. We're always learning new things. So, it's.
I've learned nothing new about my butthole. I contend to you people of the internet. I actively refuse to learn things about my butthole if I can avoid
Oh,
it.
this movie has led us in some interesting
That's
directions here.
awful. Like,
Yeah.
look at what it did to our friendship. We're never going to look at each other again, people of the internet.
So I'm going to throw in here Piranha 3 Double D, not Piranha 3D, which is, let me tell you, if you haven't seen it, a fantastic movie, one of the best gore movies of the 2000s. But the sequel to that, Piranha 3 Double D, much more, kind of up its own ass about like, the kind of humor that it's trying to do. Like it's so in on its own joke and thinks it's the most clever thing in the world. And I think that that's kind of what made it fall apart a little bit from its, predecessor. And I think the Invisible Raptor, it's like they probably wrote these jokes like one pass and we're like, yeah, that's good, it works, we're good, this fits. But as far as like these kinds of like, monster gore plus comedy type of movies, I got one more I'm going to bring up after this, but this one kind of strikes
Okay.
the same kind of balance though of like, it's kind of trying to be a real movie, but at the same time it's also just kind of not even being a movie, it's just being a goof from beginning to end.
I see. Yeah, I didn't know that one. Gore hits me in a weird way sometimes. So I've never been like as much into horror as I am into animation and other such things. But
Hmm.
I love the original Piranha.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about Joe Dante earlier. That's one of his earlier projects. God bless the man. Even on his like lesser known, sometimes less heralded projects, he's still doing interesting, fun stuff usually. And I actually bought a copy at Walmart the other day because I saw it there and it's like I've never actually owned a copy of this. I don't know when I'll
Nice.
get around to watching it, but it's cool to have on my shelf now. That's been something I've been thinking about, for a minute. Like I
Yeah.
can't see it
Yeah.
for a little while.
I should watch that
I
movie. I've seen it like years, like 20 years ago at least, but I should rewatch that one of these days, the original Piranha.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's got some stuff in it that's fun. It's got some period piece stuff that's fun. Okay, I want to bring up another thing. Like, are you familiar with the Sharknado films?
Yeah, I actually had never seen them. Okay, so here's the thing. They strike the exact balance where I just kind of roll my eyes and I'm like, all right, I get it, but I don't really need to watch that. That for
Yeah.
whatever reason, the Invisible Raptor, I was just like, you know what, I do need to watch this one. But I saw Sharknado last year. They did like a 20th anniversary or something back in the movie theater in 3D.
20 years?
Or was it
God, I'm
20,
so old.
15 or 20 years, but yeah, it was in 3D and it was actually pretty damn fun. I missed it the first time around.
It was in 3D.
It was
That's
they
pretty
up converted
cool.
it to 3D. Yeah, it was wild.
Was it good 3D?
Yeah, they did a pretty damn good job of it, and there's
Uh,
plenty of stuff to throw around the screen.
Hell yeah. I think maybe I've seen the first Sharknado, but I have not bothered to watch any of those sequels.
Yeah,
I will admit though, I did read the Archie Sharknado comic because I couldn't help myself. I've I think I've kind of fallen in love with Archie as a property over the last couple of years because I just
hmm.
keep finding like so many bits of weird, like cheeky goodness in it, and I really like the newer stuff that's been happening. I got a Jughead time travels in it. That's all you need to know. You can look it up from there. And
Nice.
I wish this film could maybe find a cheekier way to strike their satirical balance. Like, wouldn't
Yeah,
that be better? Like than just prolonged shit jokes? Because I think the problem, like here in tone, is that we so want to like make fun of Spielberg, but I wish we had more of them instead of lowbrow humor. Honestly, that would have been much better for me.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, again, we keep kind of going back to it about, the quality of the humor and just how big of a mixed bag it is. And again, this movie did make me laugh a bunch. And so, like, I can't really fault a movie if I'm laughing. Like, I'm just kind of like, fine, I'm along for the ride. I saw a bunch of people on Letterbox say that this is like if Ryan Reynolds went to Jurassic Park, which I feel like is kind of an apt
No,
comparison. I don't know.
I
I
actually
kind of
think
see
that
it.
would be much better. I think that would be much better. I think Ryan
Yeah.
Reynolds has better, like, corny jokes to play off of. You know what? I didn't think the last Deadpool movie was that, like, brilliant or anything, but I still reliably got a laugh every 15 minutes or so. Like,
Yeah.
he's that good at bringing humor into this stuff. Like,
He's good at what he does, that guy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I hate myself for liking him as Deadpool so much because now I get him as Deadpool in every single fucking thing he does, and it
This
ruins Deadpool for me until I get more Deadpool.
He's gonna do it till the day's done acting, like,
I can't
seriously.
blame him. I make
Yeah.
so little money. I would take all that money if it was offered to me.
Yep.
I would
Yep.
make him put it on a table so I could, like, wrap my whole arms around it and, like, smush it into my chest. I get it, Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go with one last puzzle piece to wrap it up from me, and that is the Velocipastor, which
I
is
forgot about that fucking thing. Oh
did you
man.
ever see it?
I saw about half of
Yeah.
it.
It's fun.
I
It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. I think that that movie does kind of nail the tone that this movie is going for in that it's obviously put together by, the idea of a pun title and then just kind of working backwards from that and just, wouldn't this be ridiculous if, and then just going straight up parody with it and straight up slapstick really more than anything. And I think that the idea that it goes comedy first and like action movie is somewhere around like I don't know, sixth, and drama is not even on the table for that movie. It's just purely ridiculous, and I think this movie needed to be purely ridiculous.
I have another, like, satirical type thing that I'd been thinking about earlier. I haven't watched it in a long time, but did you ever see Danger Force 5?
No, I've heard that that is pretty damn fun.
It's very fun. It's an Australian production, and it's just a huge just takedown of just all the tropes of 60s adventure and sci-fi and action shows, and it I mean it really goes balls out with its love of 60s, like, nostalgia, because it uses, like, the most obvious little toy sets you can imagine for all its big car and chase sequences, and it's it's very broad in its jokes, but it's also hyper sharp with the way it presents them. Like,
Mm,
it can do a low joke in a way that seems highbrow because of how it's presented. And I wish this movie had maybe watched that show and taken some notes. Like, this movie could have used it. Like, if you really kind of stick to the more character based jokes. There are a few good ones in here. I laughed a few times. I'll give it that. Like, I this wasn't the worst movie I've ever seen, but, like, 2 hours for all this. Like, we could have cut, some of this, like, improv dialogue. I feel like some of this is improv. Like,
yeah.
just the way they, like, hang off of each other's words sometimes. Like, it feels too much like improv for me not to notice.
Yeah, yeah, and just, knowing when to rein that kinda stuff in because, some of it's good and, I think I obviously enjoyed it more than you did, but, like, it's just way too long for the kind of movie that it is, and, this movie at times seems like it knows what kind of movie it is, but then when you see that runtime, you're like, "Wait a minute, maybe it doesn't." Like,
I have
I'm not
a I have
100%
a
sure.
perfect example for that. When they mention that the raptor's name is Chance,
Chance the
and the
Raptor, yeah.
guy's like Chance the Raptor, and, like, okay, that joke would sit there fine, but then they name, like, several other people. Like, Denny's like, fuck Chance the Raptor, and fuck Tyler the Creator, and fuck Aerosmith too, and I just I hated that so much. Like, please just let the Chance the Raptor joke sit. Like, that would have been good. That would have been cute. And we could have gotten like enough of a laugh from everybody looking at each other in disbelief, and then we could have cut to the scene.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, this movie ruins its own jokes with other jokes. Like, frustrating.
It's a little too much. Well, I think that's a great list of pieces we got here. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything else you wanted to mention about the Invisible Raptor before we wrap it up?
Again, it does have some thrills. It's got some kills.
Hmm.
I wish it had gone a little sexier instead of gross, but that's it. Like, if you're into lowbrow movies, it has its moments. If you enjoy B movies, it has its moments. If you're a satire fan, maybe if you're into Spielberg, maybe this would offer something for you on a satirical level. Maybe you get some chuckles out of the more obvious references than I do. I I don't think this was the worst thing I've ever seen. It had some budget to it. When you get a glimpse of the Invisible Raptor, like, even though it's no budget, the way they composited it into the scene is actually okay and tolerable, and the kills are fun enough to watch. And they actually did give the Raptor some intelligence. Like, the Raptor is clever enough to get out of its situations and things that it's going into. Like,
He does a whole Weekend at Bernie's sequence, which could be another puzzle piece.
I thought about that earlier. I should have brought it up. I kind of loved that joke when I realized what it was.
Yeah,
Like Sean Astin in that Hawaiian shirt is such a Weekend at Bernie's reference. Like, I should have got that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. This movie is just it's filled with that stuff. And yeah, I think like we've been saying the whole time, it's like the main thing is it could have been cut down a lot, but there's definitely some good stuff in there. And if you love the idea of the premise, I think it's worth, at least checking out, and then maybe fast forwarding a little bit along the
I
way.
mean, look, there are people who watch like Adult Swim all day and night, and I bet this would appeal to them too if they just can't watch another episode of Mr. Pickles.
Yeah, yeah, I think this would work quite well for them. So, yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up the Invisible Raptor. Is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
I haven't gotten to watch too much lately. I, I'm going to be doing a Batman Cape Crusader series with Catwoman Core, the meme page operator, and yeah, that's going to be a good time. Which I really enjoyed that show. The only thing I would say that is like a frustrating thing about it is that it has like very flat, like modern animation to it, like
Hmm.
done by some lesser studios, and I grant that we're never going to have another show that looks like Batman the Animated Series, but I still wish we just got a little bit more money put into this thing. But everything else about it is pretty good and kind of passes the stuff test. Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about that.
Right on.
I'm sure there's a portion of your audience that's seen the new Batman season who doesn't like Batman.
Most likely, most likely. Well, right on. Robbie, tell people where they can find you and your podcast and everything you're up to.
Hey, everybody, you can find me at Conversations with Robbie Sherman on Spotify and Apple. Find me through Blue Sky. I got an old Twitter. Don't worry about that site. Fuck Musk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Robbie, I'm glad we got you on for this one. I look forward to getting you back for the day the Earth blew up pretty soon here, whenever that actually comes out. And
Yep.
yeah, thanks so much for doing the show.
Been a pleasure being on here, David. So appreciate you having me. This was a good time, regardless of the embarrassments.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about the Invisible Raptor. Thank you to Robbie Sherman for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. First of all, make sure you're subscribed because we got a lot of episodes on the way. But also, if you thought of any puzzle pieces that we didn't bring up, I feel like there are a lot more we could have gotten into with this episode, obviously, with references everywhere and all kinds of things being skewered within this movie. If you thought of any puzzle pieces for the Invisible Raptor, please send them my way and I will read them on the next trailers episode. I always love hearing from listeners, so do get in touch. You can do that on social media at Piecing Pod, in the Facebook group Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. There's also a contact form on our website, piecingpod.com. Get in touch. Also, I'm always looking for new guests, so get in touch about that too. We do have a Patreon I got to tell you about, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, from Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. Lots of great stuff over there. You get early access to episodes, video versions of some episodes. I'll be posting a bunch of stuff for my music in 2025. There's a bunch of exclusive stuff right now that you can check out from my music, but a lot more is being prepared right now. Check it out at patreon.com/bydavidrosen. Of course, I just appreciate you being out there listening, but if you want to support the show in that way, it is very much appreciated. So I'm going to close this out with a piece of music like I always do. And, it's always been one of my dreams to score a giant monster or a dinosaur or creature type, feature film. That is something that I'm hoping to eventually do as I continue on with my film composing career that just goes in all different kinds of directions. The closest I've gotten so far, and I know I've played this on the show before, I forget what episode, it was something similarly ridiculous to the Invisible Raptor, but this is the score from a short film about these frogs that get mutated and grow giant, and then they, in very spectacularly gory fashion, kill their owner, the guy who was experimenting on them. It's a film called Croak. It is one of my favorite shorts that I've scored. You can find it on YouTube. I'll put a link somewhere. But this is a piece of the score from the film Croak, and hopefully I'll get to score a full feature monster movie at some point. But for now, this is the score from Croak. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.